Greetings, everybody. Wake up, South Africa. Welcome to the Coffee Conversation. Dean, how are you?
Apiwe, good. How are you? We're going to at least try and have a little bit of fun in these sessions amongst these difficult topics. But we've got a lot to discuss today.
Yeah, you seem to be moved by Brackenfell. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been happening. It's been a little over 2 weeks on the news. And,
3 weeks.
Yeah, a little over 3 weeks. It's been happening. What's your feelings really around what's happening? Because there are mixed emotions, there are mixed feelings about it all. What's your take?
And there's a video clip that you showed me yesterday. I think it was yesterday, of a guy who joined the rally, the EFF rally, a white guy who joined it and ended up getting beaten really, really badly. And the only thing I think that saved his life was that the police threw in the stun guns and it stopped the whole thing. Maybe we should watch that clip before we go any further. Let's have a look at that clip.
If in 1 hour they're not bringing our parrot back, who's this one now? What is the problem? Move! Move! Fight us! Fight us! I'm up on Teto! Fight us! Fight us! Fight us! Fight us!
Please! What are you doing there? What I don't want to fight anymore. What are you doing there? What are you doing there? What are you doing there? No, what are you doing there? What are you doing there? What are you doing there?
Apiwe, that's a very emotional clip. So I just want to ask you, because we spoke about it yesterday, when you saw that for the first time, what was your knee-jerk, your gut reaction in seeing that video?
My knee-jerk. Okay. I have to be honest. I have to be honest because I've been following the story.
Yeah.
I've been following the story. So when I saw that happening, in my mind I was like,
yeah, they beat up the white guy.
That's a payback. That's a payback because the previous week they beat up the black guy.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I was like, because I was not really sure what were the guy's motives of approaching the protest.
Yeah.
So the first was, why would he approach them? Why does he think that he can do that? Why does he think he can do that while blacks were running away from them just the last week? And he thinks he can just approach them knowing the history of the EFF, knowing what they stand for and their aggression.
Yeah.
Why does he think he can just go in the middle of black people who are angry at white people? Why does he think he can do that?
Yeah.
What would warrant such an attitude of boldness, if you will?
It's so significant what you're saying, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It looked as though he had a good intention. He was there, and one of the beautiful moments for me is after he'd got beaten up is he went down on his knees and he went, I don't want to fight anymore. And I think that's how a lot of people feel. So I think his intention was right. But I agree with you. To walk into the middle of an organized EFF rally, any rally, and then suddenly demand that they must listen to you is arrogant. It's a good intention, but there's an arrogance there that is highlighted, I think, at how many white people might feel. That because we feel we're in a position of righteousness, because we want to make right, that we have a platform to automatically ask that people listen to us. And I think it was foolish for him
I'll
to
tell
do
you how that looked like. I'll tell you how that looked like. To me, that looks like somebody in his mind who's so superior.
Yeah.
He will just go, he thinks, and people will listen to him because he's the principal anyway, and there's a bunch of kids who are making noise, and he's trying to set them straight.
Yeah.
So that is where the arrogance is, to think that you can
I think it was sorted out though. I think he got a pretty severe beating.
Yeah.
And it's, as much as it's tragic, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction was, geez, like, and I had to immediately stop and say, I'm not going to go there. Look at it for what it is. And his arrogance, as we've identified, coming in, I think his intention was right, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He did not acknowledge the fact that for the last, I would say, 150 years, actively, blacks and whites have been digging this massive trench of separation. I don't think the distance here is very far, and this is leading to what we're all about. I don't think the distance at the top is very far. I think it's too far for even an Olympic athlete to actively jump over, but I think it's just out of reach. And there's barriers that are preventing from building bridges. What he tried to do was walk over a bridge that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And what he did is he jumped into this cavern of fear, mistrust, resentment, and even in some instances hate, and there was foolishness. Now, when they started beating him, I heard the guys on the stage saying, get them out, which I don't disagree with. He shouldn't have been there. But then they started saying something when they started beating him. What were the guys on the stage saying from the EFF while he was being beaten?
Well, the guy who had the mic,
Yeah.
the guy who was on the podium, he was actually calling the fighters. He was calling them to stand down.
Stand down.
Ahlale phansi, ibambe umthetho. That's now an old comrade way of telling people to be disciplined. He was
Good.
actually calling them to be disciplined. He was saying, don't do that. Let's not beat him. He was actually helping the police. So
I think we need to give him credit for that.
it is something to be acknowledged.
You know, I do think that the EFF has enough things for us to legitimately go after them for. That when they do something right, it's worth giving them credit for that. And I think well done to the leader of the EFF. You know, my first point is they have the right to be there. And they are right to be there. Because there's an accusation of racism. Now, their motives, separate. They have the right to be there, and they're right to be there, and they organized it, and they were legitimately there. And when that broke out, for the guy on the platform with the microphone to tell the fighters to stand down, I think is encouraging.
It's encouraging. And also what's encouraging is when you look at it, because initially you think this guy is arrogant when he's approaching them, but then the end is beautiful because you see him go on his knees and he's actually uttering this. He's confessing that I don't want to fight anymore. So you realize that, you know, this guy, he's not even mad to a point that he wishes that he could retaliate and hurt somebody back. He's just pleading that I don't want to fight anymore. And I do think that is the sentiment of many South Africans. That is the sentiment of many South Africans, that we are tired of this.
Yeah.
We don't want to fight anymore. It's time that the bridge becomes visible. It's time that we put our efforts together in building that bridge so that someone like that guy has a place to walk on.
Yeah.
So that the highly emoted subject of race and even of EFF protesting can have some sort of a structure in which it can be approached and dealt with understanding and respect for both parties, so that no one feels disrespected. So I think there is a need for that, which is, again, the reason for the show.
The reason for the show. I think it's so easy as an antagonist, as somebody wanting to light fires around that story, to either attack the white guy or to attack the EFF. But I think the way that it played out was marvelous. The arrogance of white people sometimes putting themselves, because we feel that we're righteous, in a position of threat and not feel threatened. Because when he stood there in the beginning, he was like, hey, what's your problem? No, I don't have a problem. There's so little sensitivity to what those people are not there because they're happy. They're not protesting because they think life's good.
They're not there to hug a white
They're
man.
not there to hug a white man or anything. They're there complaining about the injustice that they have legitimately suffered for, let's say, 150 years. Now, we can have a debate about how long that is. That's a separate debate. But I would say at least I can qualify 150 years, which is long enough. How long do you want it? Okay, that's separate. There was no sensitivity on his side. And their response to him was like, you are just frustrating me, because of the arrogance. And the beautiful moment, as you poured out, was when they came to confront him again, and he said, I don't want to fight anymore. And that's where we saw humility.
And remember, they're asking for their parade.
Yeah.
Because there was a guy who snatched their parade. So as he's talking here, he's saying, where's our parade? We want our parade. So it's a very... And then I think we mentioned it earlier, that, you know, the very approach of the EFF to the Western Cape and what is happening in the Western Cape, it's filled with the attitudes that have been existing towards the Eastern Cape in the past, because there is this general understanding and belief about what the Western Cape stands and represents when it comes to race.
Yeah, I think we must actually take a show to have a look at that in depth, because there's a lot of things that I think as a white guy I miss. And look over. And we need to look at that because it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about what's right and what's wrong to find the way through. And I want to look, one more thing I want to look at in terms of Brackenfell, what happened. The accusation that it was a whites-only party, private party.
Or the function.
The function, okay? And EFF are right and have the right to protest, in my view. That's what our Constitution offers us. Now, rioting, separate story, okay? But they didn't riot on that first Friday. What I saw was that, I don't know if it was teachers or parents or whoever, there was a group of people representing students or learners at the school. They ran out to confront the EFF coming towards their, handing their
And they were
proposal.
greater in numbers.
They were greater in numbers, so I think that they were emboldened because they felt more powerful. This time they were a little bit short, especially one guy on his own. And they came out and they tried to bully the EFF. The reasonable thing to recognize is that the EFF is right to, anybody is right, not just the EFF. Everybody is right to protest against an accusation of racism, and we have the right to protest. What the people representing the school maturely should have done. Now, and to say that is difficult because, you know, as soon as the EFF rocks up, it's not just a protest, it's also an intimidating act. But they're allowed to do that. They're free to do that. That's the beauty of a free society. We can't hold that against them. I want to applaud them for that because at least somebody is saying something. Because everybody else is shutting up. And it's sad. We need to start saying something. What they should have done is they should have taken a stand in the grounds where EFF wanted to meet them, received the accusation, and opened up the invitation to all South Africans, including every political party, to send a representative, if they agree, to action the investigation that EFF is asking for. If they are not guilty, if there's no liability, there's nothing to defend. If there is liability, there's nothing to defend. They need to expose it and rectify it. That's what's going to bring the healing. But they handled it badly. They confronted. And this, you don't deal with a bully by confronting him physically. You deal with a bully by exposing them in front of everybody who disagrees with what they're doing. And if they are really a bully, then they get embarrassed. If they aren't, it gets resolved. So hats off to EFF for saying something, and a shame to the rest of us in South Africa for keeping so quiet.
So we know who you are voting next year.
Not a chance.
We know who you are voting next year. You are voting the EFF.
No, I'm not a communist. I don't. I like many of the ideas of community and social structure, but I don't like the fact that it would be imposed down the barrel of a gun. Another program.
Another program indeed. Another program indeed. And so, do you think we have a work to do? Looking at just Brackenfell and everything, do you think that there is an interest in even coming together and working out issues in our country? Or do you think there is just war looming?
I think if we don't recognize the hope that that video shows, EFF leaders saying, restrain yourself, even in his road to hell action of good intentions, he still had a good intention. He was clumsy and stupid and deserved the beating probably. And you know, if he wants to lay charges, good for him. And if he doesn't want to lay charges, good for him. There's a legal process to deal with what those guys did in attacking him. Let the law sort it out. We don't need to take this into the public. There is law. And if he decides
So you are saying there is interest?
I think there's hope and there's interest. But I also think that there's a danger that unless we engage that hope and interest to deal with the barriers that are preventing us from building bridges, that outcome, one day the police won't save his life. And once that war starts, it might be wildfire. There's a massive danger. That's what we're involved in.
The reason why I'm sticking with this interest issue is because, again, it's so much in my ears that white people are not interested. And so we have that one guy maybe that we can look at and say, wow, what a beautiful ending to his beating, that he would go on his knees and say, I don't want to fight.
Yeah.
But there are many who don't share his sentiment. And so we have to recognize the problem as maybe you don't agree. In order to solve it, in order to fix it, we have to look at its extent.
Yeah.
We have to look at its extent because Brackenfell is just but one trickle of a sea of hatred that exists in our country. And you know, it's in the workplace, it's everywhere.
I don't want to say it's a seed of hatred, because if it's a seed of hatred, then there's no hope. I think it's a seed of fear.
I say it's a C. I said
Oh, a
there's
C.
a C, yes.
Oh, okay. It's a C, but I think it's also more fear mostly. There are hateful guys. But I think the hope is that it's mostly fear. And that we can talk about.
We can talk about the fact that white people fear black people.
And black people fear white people.
Again, we are dealing with historic things here.
Yeah.
We are dealing with historic things here. And then the question I would like to pose here is that, there is something that is said among black circles, is that if there is anyone to fear another, it's black people that should fear white people. And then again, that I have to say in inverted commas, because there is also another one that goes, black people only hate each other. There is more black on black violence. And there is the government is even black. That's oppressing blacks.
You know what it's like? It's the fear is the shadow of the monster. Did you ever watch that little cartoon? And there was like a little chicken or something under the bed that had like a stomach ache. And he was going, "Ugh." But the shadow was this massive creature that looked and the kids saw this massive shadow of the creature. And then this little chicken walked out with Be stable. The little chicken walked out with a stomach ache. And he went, oh, but he was terrified by the shadow. That fear is real. I'm hoping it's just the shadow. Because you said earlier that there's many people who, I don't think there's many, I think there's more that actually want to go do the stupid thing that white girl did and goes, I actually just want to talk to you. He was very, as I said, good intention, road to hell paved, dumb way. I think there's many more people, both white and black, who want to have that conversation. You mentioned earlier we live in the Western Cape, and it's not like the rest of the country. I can testify to that. When I go to Joburg, when I go to Durban, when I go to places, I see whites and blacks and everybody interacting a lot more favorably than here, than in the Western Cape. And there are some antagonists. Now, it's not that it's the whole Western Cape is racist, but it does seem like there are more here in relation to what's there. So if there's 1,000 people there and 5 are racist, well, then if there's 1,000 people here, maybe 9 are racist or 8 are racist. There seems to be more, and they're more aggressive in it, in taking a stance. I want to say something. Whites aren't unified. Whites aren't a people. We're not one people.
But
Whites
you're all white.
Yeah, but we're all white. But let's say blacks are all one people.
Yeah, but blacks are all black.
Yes. Okay. So are we a race? No, we are just an ethnic group, but we're not a people. So to stick all whites under one blanket or stick all blacks under one blanket is racist.
It's a very flawed premise. I get it, even as I'm saying, because South Africa is a rainbow nation. There is colors, there is Indians, there is all those ethnic groups that are not even recognized in the conversation. So
absolutely,
it's a very flawed premise.
Let me just highlight this, because we have examined the differences in the black cultures, but in the white cultures there's massive differences as well. So, for example, Jews marry Jews. Greeks generally marry Greeks. Poras generally marry Poras. I hope Pora isn't a derogatory statement. I've never said it in a derogatory way. Lebs marry Lebs. Yugoslavs marry Yugoslavs. And generally English marry English and Afrikaans marry Afrikaans. Generally. So it's not like we're a people, and we're all very different. I went to a Mediterranean household when I was young, the very, very first time. And the table ethic is so difficult and different to what mine was that I was in shock. I mean, they grab the bread, they rip it, they throw it at each other, and they have a ball at the table where we sit there with our knives and forks. The cultures are very, very different, and we're not unified as a people. So whites aren't a people. Like blacks, I don't think are a people, but there's an existence of an ethnic group that has certain origins, but even those origins are very, very different. And that's something we can develop.
The attitudes are determined by practical and actual events. The attitudes are, it's not, people are angry because of where they are at.
Yes.
And people are angry because of what they see someone else enjoy and experience.
Yeah.
So when you talk about cultures, it becomes then something else. It becomes something else because cultures within themselves, do they really have an impact on socio-political situations? Or do they just have an impact on interactions?
Maybe they do, but not to the same degree. So if we look at the color thing, white you can put into a group because our experience as white people is relatively similar in benefiting from the monopoly of opportunity in apartheid, for example. So for that, you can say, yes, whites have the same outcomes almost unilaterally. And it's actually not unilaterally. It's you get like whites, the poor whites are like the rich blacks in the old days. Okay. And then you get like the richer whites and stuff. Where the blacks, you had like unilaterally a different experience. And that way, the experience that we had is singular, but our responses and our attitudes and our things are all varied. So it's to maybe try not mix the two entirely, but not acknowledge the fact that the experience as a white person is entirely different historically. And certainly even up till now, for most black people, very different to what the black people have experienced historically and up to now. But to say that I'll give you an example. So I go to the mall here in George, and I'm presenting 2 fruit juices that we want people to test. So my line was, I wonder if you could help me. Please, can you taste both these juices? Tell me which you think is better. So I give that speech to this guy, and he goes, luister hierso boetie. Die enigste, and you can beep this if you want, die enigste woord wat ek verstaan in Engels is Coca-Cola. Praat ordentlik. This is 2012. In South Africa, that this Afrikaner refused to speak English to me, even though he understands it and he will not speak it. We're certainly not united in what's happening in South Africa in the white environment. My grandfather didn't accept me as a grandchild until my brother died because I spoke English at home. Even in my own family, there's divisions. We're not a unified people with one thought process. That's our hope, and neither are the blacks.
That's where the necessity for an intentional conversation becomes a reality, because much of what we entertain, much of what we live our lives from, it's what we are told from the, government houses. It's what we are told by politicians, what we are. Yeah. So we seem to be missing our own internal voices, the voice of logic. Right. The voice of truth. That's where I think we need to start from. Yeah. We need to start from a place that I'm an individual. I should check my heart how I interact with people, because this situation of listening to people who have agendas is getting us to a place where we are not even interested in talking and reasoning with each other. Yeah. And so that's where...
Look, we don't claim the monopoly on truth in any form or fashion in our conversations. We merely claim that we need to have a dialogue. Now, I want to ask you a question. Black or white, red blood was your idea that you brought to me. Give me that idea from your simple perspective. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Let's introduce the idea of black and white, red blood, because that's ultimately what we're selling.
It's because,
and we got 3 minutes. Sorry to do that to you, but we got 3 minutes.
Black or white, red blood is an idea that is meant to kick against the idea of separating people. Because I don't believe that a separated people is a strong people. And it's an idea that recognizes the fact that South Africa is one. And now if South Africa is one, people have to think that way. But at the moment, it's like South Africa is many countries. It's many nationalities that are in this one country, and they are not interested in working with each other. They would rather chant slogans that favor their own, superior idea of their own group, like Black Lives Matter, for instance, and then
Farmers' Lives Matter.
Farmers' Lives Matter. And where do we stop? Where do we stop digging these holes that we are sinking in? Because the more you say yours, the more I will say mine. Yeah. The louder you say yours, the louder I will say mine. So the hole will just become deeper and deeper. But we recognize the fact that we are all human beings before we are any other group. We are all human beings. Before I am a black man, I am a human being. Before you are a white man, you are a human being. Who celebrates that idea? Who celebrates that thought?
When you made that statement to me, what grabbed me about it is the idea that if I have a car accident and my blood spilled on the floor, as a black person, you can save my life. Your blood in your body can save me, and vice versa. It's not like we're different. Ultimately, we're all human. I don't even know if there are different races. Maybe there's just ethnic groups, because that kind of tells us that we can live together. If you bump your head, you get a bump. I bump my head, I get a bump. Okay. One big difference, which you didn't mention earlier, is that, well, maybe when I lie in the sun, I turn pink like a lobster, and you don't. Okay. There's a joke about that. But fundamentally, you cry for the same reasons, you laugh for the same reasons, you mourn for the same reasons. Your family is going to die, my family is going to die, I'm going to die, you're going to die. Fundamentally, we are the same. And what that opens up is that if you're sitting on the other side of the table, that being a human, like I'm a human, your value is exactly the same as mine. And if we can see the other person sitting on the side of the table with the same value as self and respect it, that's the foundation.
Ignoring that is ignoring humanity. Ignoring that is ignoring the fact that you are a human being. You're just moving on the animalistic instincts to predate others. Do you want to bring in that t-shirt now?
Yeah, give me that shirt, please. I just want to thank you. Okay, this is the basic fundamental idea that we put into a logo. Can you see that in the camera? Okay, so black and white, red blood. That's the idea that we want to make fashionable. We're not selling a t-shirt, we're selling the idea, and we want it to become fashionable so that whether you're black or whether you're white, we have equal value. We recognize the humanity and we can start interacting with each other.
Imagine the fashion that is also truth.
Making truth fashionable. Thank you for watching the Coffee Conversation. My name is Dean Haystack, and I'm just a guy who gives a damn.
And my name is Apiwe, black and white, red blood.